Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. My name is Kelly Quayle. We both work in Santa Clara Unified School District. I am a TOSA, which means teacher on special assignment for, I guess, all of you guys would know. That's just random people I have to explain. And because of the nature of working in a public school district, my job is continuously changing. As of right now, I am a literacy TOSA with a focus on equity, inclusion, and social justice.
My name's Krista Woodward. I'm also in Santa Clara Unified. I was a TOSA, a science TOSA for a long time, actually. And now I'm back in the classroom at at our independent study high school in our district. So I'm working with 9th through 12th graders. I'm on the Equitable Practices and Inclusive Curriculum team. Kelly and I co-lead. And I've also, by default, become the chair for a few years now of our union's Equity and Social Justice Committee. And that is a factor in how some of this work has gotten done. So that's why it's important to put up there. You'll see our contact information on one of them. I think Kelly might have erased hers, but we have it in a couple of places, and we'll make sure that we get the contact information for Kelly up there for you as well. Okay.
So that was a pretty incredible speech we just heard, and so everyone's probably, has some feelings stirring, have some thoughts going on in your head. So just take a minute or so with the person next to you. Based on this chart right here, how are you feeling right now in this moment? And then what is one thing that resonated with you from either the speech we just heard or the speech this morning? So it's just a quick turn and talk.
All right, everyone, I'd love to grab us back, gather us back together again. So this is, I can't help myself, I'm not just gonna read it. So Kelly and I have done a lot of work in different spaces, and we've been, feel like ruminating on this part of what we share when we're in spaces with other people. And we thought we'd share it continues to develop as we understand more and as more people contribute to the conversation about what do we do in our district to really think about the space that we're on, and how we acknowledge harm and figure out how we actually can do things to repair, not just have a slide up there saying some things, right? So maybe later in the Q&A, if anybody is interested, it might come back up again that we can talk about how we've been doing that with each other in our spaces on a more personal level in our teams. As a district, we acknowledge that Santa Clara is on the ancestral homeland of the Tamian Nation and recognize their enduring culture, resilience, despite the impacts of settler colonialism. We also want to acknowledge the Muwekma Ohlone who trace their ancestry through the Santa Clara missions. We pay respect and thanks to their people, both past and present. Something that, and Kelly, you might want to add to this, but something that we focus on quite a bit, even on the teams that we work with to work on the documents that we'll be sharing with you today, is kinship. And so in the green box, in Tamian, Ohlone, and other indigenous communities, kinship extends beyond immediate family to include connections with the land, ancestors, humanity, and the natural world. This network fosters a profound sense of belonging, community, and mutual support, highlighting a worldview of deep interconnectedness. And something we ask ourselves, but ask of each other is, consider how you might foster kinship in your classroom, your school, your organization. What does that look like in your meeting spaces? And so just something to think about. As for today's goals, some things we'll be doing. We're going to reflect on your own experience. You're going to reflect on your own experiences in education, whether it be as an educator or as a student, or maybe a parent or someone in the community who works with other kiddos who are in the system, the school system. When it comes to equity and inclusion, we're going to explore the Equitable Practices and Inclusive Curriculum Toolkit, and you'll hear us say EPIC quite a bit. We didn't mean for it to be that way, but that's what the acronym is, and we like acronyms in education, right? Learn about our district's successes and challenges as we try to reach our EPIC goals, and think about how this information might help your organization grow. Okay, so these are some things we're going to be spending time doing.
But as Krista mentioned, we're going to start with having you all just kind of take a moment to think about your own educational experience and how inclusive or not inclusive it was when you were growing up. So on your in your chairs, you do have these handouts that have the questions in front of you. If you have, something to write with, you can go ahead and do that. That would be great. If not, just take about a minute to think about your answers to one of these two questions. The first one is, recall your history education growing up. What do you remember learning about the founding of America? What do you remember learning about the contributions of people who have been traditionally marginalized? In what ways did you see or fail to see your own identity reflected in what you learned? Or think about the books that you were assigned in school. Was there diversity among the authors and characters? Which identities were most prominent and which were missing? In what ways did you see or fail to see your own identity reflected in what you've learned? So choose one of those, take about a minute to think about it, do a quick write, and then we're going to have some conversations. So you all are going to do a real quick dyad share. So basically, you're going to have 3 minutes total, so 90 seconds each for you to share with a partner. And the idea is that for those 90 seconds, the person who's talking is the only person talking, and the person who's listening is truly just listening, right? As we share our stories, it's always really nice to have someone who is just truly listening to hear you rather than just respond. So find someone next to you or near you, figure out who was born the furthest away from Santa Clara, and then that person will start. And at around 90 seconds, I'll just remind you to switch. Okay? So the reason why we had you all do that kind of step back in memory lane is because what we're going to be talking about today is inclusive curriculum as well as creating anti-bias spaces for our students. And, we know everyone here knows the why, which is why we're going to do a pop quiz that you'll all get 110% on because it's very easy. But this is just our way that we're going to roll through the really centering ourselves and grounding ourselves in the why of why it is so important. Thinking both global data as well as thinking about our own students. So the first question, true or false, is parents and guardians have the right to opt their students out of curriculum that includes references to LGBTQ plus people. So go ahead and talk to your partner real quick. You got 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So, anyone want to share what you think the answer is? True or false? Oh, okay, interesting. The answer is actually false. And this is how in California. Great question. This is actually how our toolkit came into being, was that we had some parents who were complaining about their teachers reading them books or having books assigned to them that had LGBTQ plus characters or representation. And because of that, there was a lot of confusion because most of us don't know what is actually the right call on that. So that's why we kind of started getting this group together to figure out how we could make this really clear, create some policies and procedures, provide some resources. And Krista will talk about that later. But yes, the answer is that you are not allowed to opt your student out of a book because it has an LGBTQ plus character in it. There are 2 exceptions. And the first one is if it's part of a health curriculum, you're allowed to. And then the other one is if there are choices. So if it's a book club or a lit circle, students can choose a different book. Otherwise, the answer is false. You cannot do that. And in fact, in California, history teachers are legally mandated to include the contributions of LGBTQ plus folks in their curriculum. So it is a legal mandate. And one of the things that we try to figure out within our group is this idea of how do we support and encourage teachers in integrating curriculum and feeling comfortable, and then also how do we make sure that they are that they have the resources in order to do that as well. So the second one, this one I think you guys will all get. Curriculum that is culturally responsive and racially inclusive can improve the academic performance of BIPOC students. Take a minute. That one's a pretty easy one, I know. So yes, the answer is true. And what I love about the fact that you can find these kind of statistics all over the place. So this is just one of them, which is that in schools where the curriculum is culturally responsive and racially inclusive, BIPOC students are 25% more likely to achieve grade level proficiency in reading and math and graduate at higher rates. And then this is another one that also says that when students take ethnic studies, in this case, their GPA increased by more than a full grade point and their attendance increased by 21%. And what I love about this is, like, you all said, yes, you know that. But we spend so much time talking about like test scores, right? And CASP and all. What are the ways that we can improve literacy? When really, oftentimes we don't look at the fact that just making things more inclusive and culturally relevant, that in itself is a way to lift up those scores, right? And then the next one. True or false? Only 15% of children's books feature disabled main characters. This one's a tricky one. Okay, here are a bunch of falses. Yes, that's right. It's actually only 3.4% of books have disabled main characters. And this is compared to the fact that more than a quarter of Americans have disabilities. And so one thing that we have been trying to do, we had a Books for Belonging theme last year that was about our differences make our community stronger, I think it was, where we made sure that every student in every school read a book with a disabled main character. So just one of the steps we're trying to take. In order to reduce racial bias, it is better to focus solely on celebrating diversity rather than addressing racism and racial inequality. You guys just want to? It is false. And I feel, again, I heard someone say, like, what, right? Like that we know this, but so much of, Bettina Love was talking about those book bans and all those states where they're saying you can't even talk about racism, right? But again, study after study has shown that anti-racist education programs, as opposed to just diversity building programs, are significantly more effective at reducing racial bias than if you're just focusing on positive representation. And so this is in contrast to those views that talking about privilege and systemic inequity is harmful. It shows that these experiences actually lead to positive change in students' attitudes and values. This is your satellite data. We had our first mandatory ethnic studies class cohort last fall. Before that, we had classes, but this was the first one where every single ninth grader took it. And as you know, ethnic studies is all about kind of talking about systems of oppression and the 4 I's. And so at the end of it, we were a little bit nervous to see if we were going to get pushback, but at the end of it, we gave a survey to our students about their experience in the class. And so we had 6 out of 7 of the teachers reported from 3 high schools. And as you'll see, 52% said it was very positive. I think if you do the numbers, it's something like 87% had a positive experience, and less than 2% said they had a negative experience. And so we cover really bold topics there, and students across the board felt that it was positive. And then we also asked them, because of ethnic studies, how has it helped you grow as a human being? And so we had 80% of our students said, I have a better understanding of the world and my place in it. They also talked about being more open-minded. And then 62%, more than half of them, said that they feel more compassion for people who are different from them after one semester of an ethnic studies class. And this was our very first iteration, so it was messy. We were building it as we went. So again, this is kind of the satellite data. This is the local data. I'll also speak personally, and this is, one of the reasons why this is important to me, but there are plenty of other reasons. I have a son who goes to one of the schools in our district, and last year he was in second grade. And I've told this story before and I've cried, but I'm not going to cry this time. Like the first week of school, he came home and I was looking at his papers in his backpack, and he had this paper where you write down like your favorite colors and like your hobbies. And for family, he had crossed out the family box. And the reason I asked him about it, and he said, well, I was embarrassed. I didn't want the other kids to know that I had two moms. And it was heartbreaking, of course, to think that your kid doesn't feel safe bringing his whole self into his whole authentic self into school. So, plenty of conversations around that. He's a very happy, well-adjusted child. But fast forward a year, and so third grade, he's in third grade now this year. And we had one of the things we did, we implemented this, or we adopted this equity framework, and one of the aspects of it was the inclusion of social justice standards in curriculum. So one thing that we did this year is we've added social justice standards to all of our, every unit for K-6. There's a social justice standard, there is a lesson, and there's a book. And so a good friend of mine, she read his book and did his lesson on identity in his class. And she emailed me, and she's like, wow, your kid's a funny guy, which didn't surprise me. And she said, when we asked students what were important parts of their identity, he said that one of the most important parts of his identity was that he had two moms. And the book wasn't even about diverse families. And who knows, this is just one book, but just the idea that my son was able to bring his whole self and be proud of his whole self into his classroom, into a discussion with his classmates was really powerful for me. So that's just a way of saying that this is the data all the way out there says this stuff, and then all the way to, my home and my heart. We see the same thing. You want to go? No? No, I mean, do you want to go? Which takes us to why you came, which is the Epic Toolkit.
Okay, so Kelly mentioned one thing I want to backtrack on is we might bring up things that need more context, and hopefully there will be a time when you have questions that you'll ask. One thing I heard her say was that I think you said our district adopted the equity framework. Okay, so I just want to say that part because it's not really showing up too much in the presentation slides. So there have been, as probably is going on in your district, hopefully is going on in your district, there are a lot of things going on at the same time, lots of good things happening. Okay. One of the union work, which I've been a big part of, the union work several years ago, part of it was pushing on our district to pay attention to equity and inclusion and to call it out and to bring it into our hearts and make sure that it's threaded throughout our district. And we know how long that takes. Well, we don't. But what ended up happening was, honestly, because of pressure, it probably was checking boxes at the time, the district put together a couple of committees of stakeholders. They invited people from all over the community, inside and outside of the school district, but in the community, parents, classified, certificated, just all students, parents. And there was, one of the teams was an equity and social justice committee, okay? That team ended up building an equity framework It took them 2 years. And then they made recommendations that we were hoping would go to the board. It kind of collected dust for a couple years. Okay, other things happened. There were people from these committees were like, hey, what happened, right? And then you know how it is, other initiatives, other things, and all these things are happening, but people are getting upset, right? So I'm gonna fast forward because I know this wasn't part of it. But basically we had to push, speaking up in board meetings, going and talking to administrators, talking to each other. Hey, there's this document that people worked really hard on. Some good recommendations are in there. They did a lot of homework on this, and this framework, we could actually use it to help us advocate for the educators who are advocating for their students and their families. And so if we have this thing that our board can adopt, that helps the board to be brave. That helps our district to be brave, to have this equity framework that our district is saying, we all stand by this, okay? So that actually, it gave us some teeth, okay? So as we keep hearing about how there might be individuals and small groups who are pushing back on the work that lots of people are trying to do in these spaces, that was one avenue that a lot of people in our district of like minds did to try to make something happen. So that's just one little sliver, okay? The other sliver that was happening totally parallel, it felt. Okay, so there were people on both teams. The one that was that had created the equity framework, but then there's all this other overlap. People with big hearts, extra hours, right, to build a document, like Kelly was explaining earlier, that provides some resources and some backup for not just the teachers to teach what they're supposed to teach, but for the administrators who weren't sure either what the laws are and how they are protected, and to be able to protect their own teachers while the teachers are teaching what they're supposed to teach. If that makes any sense, okay? So this document, we're gonna dive into it in a couple of minutes. I think we kind of talked about this already, right? What we ended up doing is, I feel like there were finally, like there was a teacher who reached out to one of us and said, there are teachers who are being attacked for reading a book, or someone put up a Black Lives Matter flag. Is that okay? Principal said it's not okay. It's okay, right? But the principal said it wasn't, and they didn't mean any harm. They just didn't know. Okay, so a team got together, and the first thing we did was we're like, data, right? Let's put out a survey and ask ourselves, what do you feel supported when we talk about teaching curriculum that is inclusive, bringing up certain topics, okay? Do you know what you're allowed to do? Do you know what you're not allowed to do? Do you feel supported at your school site by your administrators? If you're an administrator, because we did 2 different versions, we did one for admins, site administrators, and one for staff, for teachers. And we asked a bunch of questions to find out the pulse and what do we understand about what we're allowed to do when we talk about social justice, equity, and inclusion in our district, right? And boy, the data, it was all over the place. That's a whole other conversation. It was all over the place. So it was very informative, because what we found out mainly was, honestly, people don't know. They didn't know. Okay, well, that's why we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna put this document together. So then what we did was, with a lot of support from, honestly, one of our assistant superintendents of curriculum and instruction, they backed us up, and they helped us put together a team, certificated and classified staff. Also, by the way, CSEA, which is our classified union, UTSC, certificated union, okay? Teachers, support staff, librarians, wellness coordinators. We have wellness coordinators. I hope you do too. a couple of administrators were like trying to figure this out. Let's look at the data, help inform our process. What are we going to do next? What are people asking for? What do we need to do? So it was a very much a reactive document at first, okay? We start writing up some things, and then we have our iteration process still happening. It's a working document, okay? We said we better get the legal team on this to make sure that we're doing this correctly, because we're grassroots pretty much. And so we have a section on laws to know, and we are looking up all the ed codes. We're looking up all of our board policies. We're looking up, there's one more that I'm not thinking of, ed code, board policy, and something else that I can't think of, but it's in there. And we actually have to go back and do this again because we keep making changes, right? And we need to make sure that we are solid. So that's part of the process that happened to build this document that's still growing. Okay. So since the first iteration of this document, we've expanded our team. We've become more proactive instead of just reactive, because we're having more conversations and we have the time to think about how we really want to do it, not just trying to put out fires. We have a whole curriculum and instruction section. So now, again, being proactive, we're adding lessons and building our team that's building curriculum. You want to show the flip chart? We're trying to get documents. These are being distributed. These are the kinds of documents that you end up putting by the Williams Act, by the door. And they're kind of meant, it says for staff, but they're for staff, but they're also a quick go-to for the staff to show a parent who just arrived at your door with something they're upset about. And you're like, here, use this QR code. Take a look at these policies this is our stance on equitable practice and inclusive curriculum. If you'd like more information, you can chat with my principal, and we'll explain that. Yeah. Ooh, okay. Okay, this year. So those are some things that happened last year. This year, now we're doing, with support of our district, we're doing new hire trainings in this document so that all of our new teachers are going in and understanding exactly how they're protected and what resources they need. And we're finding, when we're now going to the school sites to do further trainings, we're finding out that our new teachers are helping to train their colleagues who've been at the site for a long time, right? In the district for a long time, because this is new information to so many people. We're having more conversations with lots of other people in the district, and we're building teams. And as a matter of fact, last night we hosted an equity convening for I don't know how many people in the district, like-minded folks, and we had a Padlet to sign up for something for people who wanted to. So we're trying to build, okay? Some things that we know that we need to work on still, and we're going to continue to work on. We're building our teams for this. Resources to support multilingual learners very explicitly, okay? Resources to support our students with special needs. And then we've been working on this, but as you can imagine, we're a K-12 district, and we want to do all subjects the best way we can. So inclusive social justice curriculum in all subject areas, and we're building teams, and we are lucky to have some funding for this. I'm not going to say we're going to be fully funded for all these things. Some of it, I would say, we're volunteering to do. Yeah, please.
And I just want to point out with this work, what I think is what has made it possible is that, so when you see this thing for resources to support multilingual learners, so what that requires is it requires a team of teachers who get together and develop these resources. But at the same time, you need the district office to be willing to pay for them to have the time and the space, and also to put their kind of name and backing and put it out there. So it's really about having the grassroots the people coming from the grassroots, as well as being backed by the power at the top.
Okay. Is this on? Okay. Okay, so that was a lot of front loading, right? But now we'd like to jump into looking at the toolkit. And again, apologies, our venue has changed, right? We thought we were gonna be at tables in a smaller room and you'd have lots of space to work at a table. That's not happening. So this bit.ly should give you access to the equity toolkit, Equitable Practices and Inclusive Curriculum Toolkit. So I don't know if you want to get your laptop out or you want to pull it up on your phone. It should be fairly easy to look through, to scroll through on your phone. You're definitely going to have to zoom in sometimes because you're looking at large documents at times, depending on what you click on, okay? So housekeeping, are we okay? Is anybody having a hard time getting to it? You'll get it in front of you in a second. What? So this is what we were hoping to do, and we hope you can engage as best as you can in your spaces. And it's definitely helpful to work with at least one other person to talk things out and find things, okay? We have two situations for you. If you look either in your stapled copy, or maybe it's a separate page for you, at the top, you'll see SUSD Epic Toolkit Scavenger Hunt. Step 1, find the Epic Toolkit at the bit.ly address. Number 2, start flipping through the tabs. So that means you have to be in the document, and you should notice that there are tabs on the right-hand side. And each one of those is clickable. Okay, so you click on the tab to go into the section. So you kind of just want to familiarize yourself a little bit with that toolkit and how to navigate it. Can everybody find it okay? Sure.
Like if you go to a section such as this one, in order to, you click on the tab, and then in order to go kind of forward and backwards, you can just use your arrow if you have a computer. I'm not quite sure what you do if you have your phone. Oh, you just tap on it. And it keeps going or whatever. Okay. So yeah, take some time to try to figure out these two situations, talk to the people around you. Do this as a group, do this in partners, just to get a feel for it and see if you can get everything on the scavenger hunt.
Situation 1, a parent wants to opt their student out of an English assignment because the main character in the book is LGBTQ+. What is your first recommendation as a classroom teacher? Where can you find an informational handout, like if you actually want a resource to give them? Where in the toolkit can you find further information about the Healthy Youth Act or the FAIR Act or other laws? So everybody, we have about 15 minutes left. We wanted to make sure that there would be time just in case anyone had any questions, or we wanted to do noticings and wonderings in that light. But basically, if there's something that you noticed or wondered that you wanted to share, we are going to ask you to use the microphone. So I'll walk over to you if there's anything that you wanted to ask or share out.
I just wanted to know if we can steal all of this that you just provided to us.
Yes. But honestly, last year we were still scared too. as the developers of it, we were really scared of it too. All of us were, because we had those, I don't know about you, but we had those folks coming and delivering flyers on sidewalks outside of schools last year, opt your kid out of this and that. And it was scary. And so we kept it in our own just intranet, no access to the public. But now we're like, we're transparent. This is what we're doing. And it made us feel stronger for it. And we would love to share it with you. And please use whatever works for you, for sure.
We're from Palo Alto.
I would also recommend, though, that you really think about what you might want to add that is most relevant to your staff as well. So take what works for you, and then figure out what else would be valuable. Anyone else want to share?
So I noticed this great scope and sequence using the social justice standards. My wondering was why some were omitted. I didn't see 2.2 in identity, or why certain ones.
Oh, so not all of them were covered? Oh.
2.2.
So that wasn't on purpose that any were omitted. And that's a work in progress. So we're only on I think that we're on unit 3 as far as that goes. But we just Oh, the process behind choosing those ones?
Yeah, but if it wasn't choosing, it just
Yeah. Anyone else have a wondering or a note?
Where can we get a printed version? Can we order one?
We have them, right? No. Oh, of the actual full-on toolkit? Oh, all you have to do is print it out. Like, it really isn't. It seems like it's a lot, but it really isn't. Okay. But the thing is that so here's the thing. We have printed it out before, and we've shown it at the SCOE LGBTQ plus fair. But really, so much of it is within the tabs and is interactive that the printed version doesn't actually do all that much.
Okay, so another part of that is, so we shared a bit.ly version of it with you because we wanted to force it into presentation mode, because that's the easiest way for a person to engage with the document and click all the buttons without getting confused. If you email us, I think we already have it linked in the toolkit itself, but if you email us, then we can also give you a copy of the document so that you can start making it your own. If that, right? Because the bit.ly kind of, there it is. I thought we did it because we knew for this audience it would make sense for you to have access to the slides in a way that you could start taking things. And we're very much approachable. You can send us emails. Oh, you mean you need to see the link? Oh. The emails, go back to the emails.
Are there any other wonderings, noticings that people want to share? Oh, I guess yeah. So what's in every classroom, or what's going in every classroom, I think that this is the week that it's going, is the handout. And it's essentially just broken down. So this is the parent handout that was originally created because of the people with the flyers who are coming to our board. Well, they were supposed to come to our board meeting. So we had this handout, and we were like, oh, we're just going to get it out there, kind of get in front of them. That's your flyer. This is our flyer. But since then, that has been made into kind of this flip chart that is going to be in every classroom. But even this flip chart, and I was talking to another educator just a second ago, that this flip chart, so this is what's interesting about this work, right? So the flip chart, if you look at it, it focuses mostly on LGBTQ plus inclusive curriculum. And when we created it, that was what was most necessary. But then, when we talked to our colleagues, there's a lot of conversation around, well, why isn't there more on kind of anti-racist, being culturally responsive kind of across the board? And we're like, oh shoot, we should have changed it before that. So essentially we are like continuing to iterate and iterate, and continuously making mistakes, but it's just a matter of like the more people you talk to and the more people's perspectives, the more inclusive ultimately that you can be.
Hi, I share this with your colleague. I have a comment. Being a special ed, I've had to create many things over the years, as we do as educators. And I just wanted to give you guys props because that's amazing. It's well thought out. It's really well done. You did a fabulous job. Woo woo.
Thank you. And so kind of along that same line, when it comes to, and I'm sure a lot of you here are in special education, and when we first had our original EPIC group, again, we had a certain purpose, and we didn't have representatives from the special ed education department. And we clearly need that. So this year we have brought people on, and we are going to have a subcommittee essentially who is creating resources for supporting teachers, support students with special needs. So again, we're just trying to expand it and become more inclusive of everybody.
I guess one other thing is we said that it's iterative. We keep trying to improve upon, update as needed. For example, you might know about the controversial issues board policy. I don't know if it's coming up in your district, but it's come up in ours. We revised it. It's not yet approved, the new version, I don't think yet. Or was it? Okay. And we need to update that and put it in our toolkit. So new things continue to be added. If you reach out and you need me for any needs, please do if you would like to do that. But the other thing is we could always use feedback too for improvement. So if you see things or don't see things, please give feedback, or don't be afraid to ask, because we're really just trying to, make it better. Okay? Is that it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So
I don't know.
I know, it's funny, we cut out 2 parts of it. We always do this, and I always either overplan or underplan. So we cut out 2 parts so that we weren't over planning, but so it seems like we're okay, so we're here. If people have questions, we're here. If you also just want to get home because it's after 4, go ahead and take off. Thank you.